Good morning, everyone, or good evening if you're on stateside. Good to see yous. Lukey, good to see you there last night at the Zoom session. Tracy as well. You got up early as well, I see. Yeah, I'm so tired. Yeah, I know the feeling. Back to back. What about Richard? Yes, exactly. He even got less hours. He's one for punishment. He really enjoys it. I did do the hair. I did sort myself out. It was a mad rush in the morning, but I did sort myself out. I'm just sort of in a relaxed recline, sort of a state at the moment. I spent 3 hours under the peak UV sun. Good for you, Lukey. Good to hear. Very nice. G'day, Daniel. Waiting? Ah, yes. On time, considering last night's long Zoom session. So, g'day, Wes. Oh yeah, you could try, mate. I don't think you could compete. You're just not in that league, mate. You're not in that league. Roy's next level. Quality, musical quality comes out of the man's mouth. You cannot compete. You'll have to wait a couple of hours to see him in full, clown suit, if you must. I don't discriminate against anyone. You can wear whatever you like. You can identify as whatever you like. Somebody wants to identify as an attack helicopter and suit up? Fine. I'm easy. Robert! No sunburn. Obviously, he's a carny. You don't get sunburn when you're a carny, Robert. You should know that. Birthday suit? Anyway, burn. These single words. Don't know where this is going today. I'm in the twilight zone, Richard. Thank you. Yeah, I was listening to Ted earlier. I haven't looked at their live thing. I'll look at it later. That'll be on. I always watch it on Mondays. Something to watch at work. But I did have to listen to a bit of profanity from Ted. And that Walter Willett cockwomble, he's still on the saturated fat like a dog with a bone, never changes, but showing signs of brain fog. Yes, all those boomers, exactly. Yes, it's the slip-on slap, slip, slop, slap. Throw on a hat. I can't remember the exact all the words of them. It's a musical thing we got brainwashed years ago as in our younger years, in our 20s. God. Exactly. Falling apart. Not enough vitamin D. Don't talk. You got to be very careful with Ted. He'll sort you out. Emeritus, yes. He has been around for some time. Controlling someone else's life for a very long time. He'd chew anything and spit it out. Super Ted. You've got to show him respect if you want to be on his good side. Chimp outfit Halloween. Oh, that is coming up at the moment. Yes, you could put such a suit on for Halloween. Yes, definitely. Yes, let me not stop any of you if you want to be adventurous with your suits and stuff like that. Enjoy yourselves. Go around and ask for, probably not ask for candy. Or ask for it and then give it to the vegans to poison them. Uh, just kidding. Just kidding. That's just a joke. Just for the YouTube side of things. G'day, Deborah. How are you? Good to see you here. Mate, where were you last night? Where were you? Good to see you, analytic minded. I don't. I think. What was it? Richard said. Vivid Mouse actually said that because I put a message on the community page and all that, maybe not everybody got the message. See, I'd actually done a video earlier because a lot of people actually ticked on the. Maybe people thought it was going to be the following week. Who knows? Maybe there was a bit of confusion. Maybe I wasn't clear. Anyway, too late now. We had a small bunch of very nice people. We had a long conversation with quite a few of them. I think the last person that stayed on was Tracy. So, and then her phone bombed out. That was it, which is probably a perfect timing because it allowed me to basically set up and go to bed and get some sleep, get at least some sleep. Yes, try to. Doesn't always work that way. Alien Drone Services, good to see you, mate. Havati, good to see you. Hey, Harry, you mentioned you like fermented lamb. Yes. How do you suggest making some? Very easy. Put in the fridge. I usually use herbs as well. So I like to I'll pack it with rosemary and I'll let it in the fridge sort of ferment in that regard. And I usually do get some of the lactobacillus type stuff from, your cheese, which you've got the blue cheese type thing. And I put that in the mixture. So, and it sort of, that it dominates and absorbs that smell and stuff like that. Yeah, you can leave it for a week or a couple of weeks. I usually do it for about a month or more. So, and it really it does, because I like blue cheese as well, and it literally takes some of the flavour of that as well. So it's an acquired taste. Give it a try. You may like it. Exactly. I can last out before I become pink 5 hours, and I couldn't last for half an hour in the past. So it does make a big difference. But that's after 10 years of, getting rid of PUFA out of my system from seed oils, using low-dose vitamin E to sort out all that stored PUFA that came from the seed oils. So it's a long process. So your endurance over time will improve. Lukey's had far less exposure to seed oils and sort of stuff like that, unlike myself and many others who are in the older age bracket. And so, less stored PUFA with a better diet, you're fine, pretty much. That's the advantage of youth and having less damage done to yourself compared to myself and many others. We've got far more mitochondrial damage, far more senescent cells, far more. But still, after a decade, if you're on the species appropriate diet, you can really turn things around quite a bit. So it does help. G'day, Wes. Always, mate. Currently, that's the gig. So a lot of questions, because I don't even get through questions. So I've pretty much stopped inviting people to get through questions. That's the focus. It's for the people, but I will do other stuff. I've still eventually will get Mary and many other people for different subject matters to chat and all that. They even grab you at some stage and do a little short video and stuff like that and talk about some of the stuff, in terms of hunting and other things that you've got interest in, stuff like that. So yeah, at some point, at the moment, I'm really busy. But once I have a bit of free time, I'll be focusing on that sort of stuff. At this stage, it's sort of solo, getting the answers, doing my Zoom sessions. There are Zoom sessions people can turn up to. So if they want to have conversations and stuff like that. So I actually may even invite Sky to see if I can get Sky and Tuesday and a few others if they want to turn up to my Zoom session. So I just hadn't thought about it in that regard. So I'm trying to make this whole environment interactive between people. There's no value in having those sort of things if you can't have an interaction with people in that regard. So anyway, Harry, what do you think about Dr. Jack Kruse? I think he's cryptic. Let me just leave it at that. He's too cryptic for the average person. And that doesn't help. That's always been my opinion. I've got a lot of respect. He's a smart man. I do disagree with him that basically light is more important than anything. I think that's not a valid argument at all. I think diet is first, and diet really intertwines with deuterium. I think deuterium is so important. At the fundamental level, okay, light, complex 4. Okay, if you're out in the sun, you're in a tropical environment with the majority of us can't be, you could probably extract an additional 30% energy, which is good, especially if somebody's got some mitochondrial dysfunction. But at the same time, that extra energy can actually put a load on the electron chain. If your cardiolipin is full of toxic PUFA, you can still get leakage, quite a bit of leakage. Yes, it can help a bit, but it's not going to resolve the underlying issues. The underlying issues why that electron chain is not performing well and has actually got issues is basically deuterium. And deuterium goes all the way back to food. So at the foundation will be food. That's where I've got my difference. That's where Bart's got his differences with Jack. And, I did have a bit of a running discussion once with Bart and said I'd like to debate him. And he tried to organise something, but he's not interested. So we left it at that. Bart doesn't want to basically... I don't have a relationship with Jack, so it doesn't really bother me. But Bart has a relationship, and so I just step back and have said no more in that regard. I just talk my stuff. He talks his stuff. That doesn't mean the stuff isn't valid. The difference is in importance. Where we have a difference is in the importance of one against the other in terms between me and Jack. I don't disagree with non-native EMF, with all this sort of stuff. The difference is that there are issues that related to all these things, but when you look at the totality of light, magnetism, and water, and that sort of whole totality, I tend to be more closer to the production of water as being far more important for proper functioning of, the body. At the fundamental quantum level, you're going to get far more advantage. And you can see it from the Inuit. Right up there, they've got very low levels of energy coming directly from, the sun as a source. But what they do have is long chain fats. And those long chain fats can actually furnish them a lot of deuterium depleted water, and they can really increase the quality of the energy that they can produce in the mitochondria, and also the water, the way the water viscosity is under those conditions is really good quality. I mean, nowadays they've destroyed their health because of the modern foods, but back then that level of utilizing long chain fats and their mutation further up closer to the Arctic to basically extract more deuterium depleted sources shows the superiority of the body, in the most difficult hostile environment, when the chips are down, the focus is on deuterium depletion in basically providing the best metabolic water for best cellular function. So that's why I'm more in agreement with Laszlo Boris and less in agreement with Jack in regards to the importance of these areas. So, but that doesn't mean that the stuff that Jack's talking about doesn't have validity. Yes, it does, and it's good. And it's good work. And he understands the research that the Hungarians and primarily Russians were the ones that actually where it originates from, had done. So, I take my hat off that he actually was able to put the time in to acquire the knowledge and all that. And but the problem is the way he communicates that knowledge isn't the best. And a lot of his supporters, I've noticed, I've gone on blogs and stuff and look at these supporters and go, these people are confused. He expects you either to be at his level or bad luck type attitude. I'm going, anyway. And then Bart did say a comment once upon a time. He said maybe Jack doesn't want to come across as being wrong ever. That's sort of what a true scientist does. You accept. I put up hypotheses, even in mine. I recently put one up. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I accept it. But there's nothing wrong with basically questioning things or considering other things in play. But yeah. But he's more comes from a medical field rather than a science field. That's probably another reason for the way he approaches things. I don't know. That's my opinion anyway. Anyway, let's move on. There is an Icelandic regional tradition of hanging reindeer lamb tallow and letting it get moldy. Yep, exactly. I'm just accelerating using blue cheese mold in that regard. So that's the only difference. But yes, there is. I didn't realise it. Well, there you go. Consumed with fish. Yeah, I do know there is some fermented fish type things as well, and potatoes mostly. Well, that's a newly introduced thing. Let's be clear about that. It's not traditional. I haven't tried it. I'm not exactly a fan of mold. Fair enough. Look, not everyone is. I do like blue cheese. My dad likes blue cheese, so we many times I go and buy some, and I'll buy some for him, and he does the same thing for me. So we're that regard. Brother Sean, he's pretty much into blue cheese as well. But it's just I even buy brie with blue cheese in it, type thing, where they've actually put some of the flavour of blue cheese into it. It's a French variety. Actually, they sell it at Woolies. But yeah, again, it's an acquired taste. Some people like it. Some people just absolute balk at it. What do you do? So more about the suits. You guys are having fun with your suits. This is a simple carrot. Okay. The trick or treat isn't basically for us carnies. They give out candy. It's sugary stuff. God. I'm not making any traction, am I? You talk about old school centenarian Russians regarding deuterium. Any sources to read about in Russian, if you want to. But it's been on. It's stuff that I've come across on blog sites, and people are talking about. But it's all. I need to try and find the actual studies myself, and it's basically Russians talking amongst Russians and other people like that. So you've got to translate the stuff in that regard. As I said, I look around the world. I look in, some of my really good studies that I've actually found that I haven't done the video yet, and I haven't translated all the Russian stuff as well. So I need to translate that as well, and ask a friend of mine. She's Russian to basically correct any of the grammar. So yeah, these are things that are holding me up in that regard. So, but there is information that these people are living very old age, over 100, and Yeah, but I do need to get that information and translate it. But that's for a future video. It's another thing to be done in my long videos. I was intending to do more the myths and falsehoods. COVID videos and a whole lot of other things came up, and I ended up doing those rather than my myths and falsehoods. I actually did only one. It'll be released next week. I still have to do the post-processing. As I said, there's a lot of stuff to be done, and these things take time, and some things are more priority than others. I did a couple things on the blue zones earlier, and I did some stuff with Mary as well, but I do have other things, a couple of folders and things to do, and that's next year. I just don't have any time this year. I know everybody screams, go over this, go over that. And I go, I've got a day job. Do you realize that? I only have so many hours in the day to do things. So yes, it is. And I haven't read all the Russian material yet. So I know that it's valid, but I do want to actually get some statistical stuff to really look at exactly what it's actually saying. What are the numbers exactly, beyond what the blog people are saying that the studies are saying. So I need to exactly check them out myself thoroughly, but I need to properly translate it and then properly corrected. So these things take time, unfortunately, especially when you're coming from another. I had a translated one on testosterone. It was a Iranian study. It took me about a month, well over a month actually, to get somebody to proofread it and verify that it exactly said what it said. So when you're dealing with foreign languages, not very bloody easy to deal with, and it's very time consuming. You guys don't really know how time consuming it is, which is unfortunate. So if it's Greek, I don't have a problem. I can translate Greek myself. I went to high school in Greece, so I'm bilingual, fluent in both. I can read philosophy in Greek, so I'm very fluent. So I don't have a problem there. But other languages, it's a hassle trying to translate stuff. Some of them do have English versions, especially the Korean, the Japanese. They will actually produce an English version, which is great because I don't have to do any of the translation. They've done it for me. So, but when it comes to some of the others, it's just it's a hassle. India is another place where you can get both languages. Iran, there's some universities in Iran that actually produce in both languages, both in English and Iranian. I was quite, in Persian or one of the, depending on which part of the country it is. But I was quite shocked, quite surprised. So, there I didn't have to do a lot of translations either. The Turks also produce an English version. Some of the Russian universities do, but not many. The old stuff is all Russian. The more recent stuff, there's some, and that's probably because there's some Russians that have actually moved to Western countries and actually working in different universities, and so they want to publish in some of the big Western periodicals as well. So they actually create an English-speaking version, but the old stuff is all just bloody Russian, and you just have to translate it, and it's a different language. So, and you don't want to get wrong, the translation, and then somebody Russian pointing it out and saying, "You're an idiot. You translated it wrong." So it is time consuming, unfortunately. Oh, Deborah, thank you very much. Let me go right down to Deborah's comment. Thank you. I'm arguing with a person about alkaline foods for dogs. I pointed out her error. She says body needs to buffer to keep the pH consistent. Yes, exactly. It's nonsense. It's nonsense. Dogs have the same all mammals have the capacity to basically, via the kidneys, to basically buffer it. It's the kidneys that are buffering, So the bicarbonates that are actually produced, they're also recycled by the kidneys in both dogs, rats. It actually goes way back to the rats. And the most earliest type of mammal is something that looks like a rat. So, and these are very, very tightly controlled, because otherwise you'd die if the pH shifted in any mammal. So every single mammal has very tightly controlled pH, and the kidneys are the key player. So unless you've got bad kidneys, you are heading for death if you don't get them sorted out by a medical professional, or get a transplant, or get some sort of therapy that can restore kidney function, or get dialysis. Most people don't have that problem, and most dogs don't have that problem. Well, they continue on a kibble or diet, they'll have not only that problem but many other problems, but that's a different story. Yeah, absolute ridiculous stuff. Yeah. I mean, they dogs will eat any. They run a pretty low pH in their stomach, as well. They'll eat anything, even feces, anything. So these people are just absolutely idiotic, and all that sort of stuff is very high acidic. So why would the dog need alkaline foods? Are they making alkaline foods now for dogs? Are you kidding me? Do they really want to kill these dogs off? Make them have malabsorption issues and all sorts of other things? Oh, God, what can I say? I mean, I've seen in cat food, basically, this sort of garbage that they're putting in, like plant-based garbage and all that. And yeah, I had to basically check Dad, because when he actually got food for Lucy, I said, Dad, do you realize this has got, stuff? Oh, the place that I went to buy this sort of stuff told me this is good. And I said, Dad, this is garbage. And I literally had to point him out to other things to get. And I said, that will kill Lucy eventually, probably give her cancer. It's another reason cancer is escalating through the cat and dog arena or area. Pets are absolutely escalating in terms of cancer. Dogs and cats basically need meat. Fish, a bit of fish, but primarily meat. That's what they need. Bones. That's all we used to feed dogs in the past. They never had cancer. They never had any of these ailments, skin conditions or hair conditions. They had beautiful coats. I look at some of the dogs now and some of the cats, and they don't really have very good coats on them. And it's because people are feeding them garbage. Absolute, it's just crazy. Absolute crazy. The kidneys are the kidneys are basically the thing that actually sorts out the pH, and it's very tightly regulated in all mammals. And if it wasn't, only close to death does it actually go out of whack. I mean, it's just nonsense. This sort of the alkaline theory has been debunked so many times. There are so many videos, and actually even top doctors now, physicians and all that, we're not talking about actual doctors themselves, have come out in recent years. I've seen a number of countless videos. If you Google, you'll actually find actual MDs that are actually debunking the alkaline theory. They're going through and saying this is absolute nonsense, and explaining exactly with charts and images and all that, the buffering system. So maybe you should find one of those videos and send it to her. That's what I would do, and say, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. And I wouldn't give her, like where I learned about some of the early debunking was basically back with the, and it's a hypothesis really. It's not a theory. It's a hypothesis that some crackpots came up with years ago and never proven. And pretty much since then, we've learned exactly how the kidneys filtrate, how the kidneys recycle salt, uric acid, and these bicarbonates. And they do a very good job at recycling them. So, yeah, it's a absolute non-issue. So it's crap. But unfortunately, there's a lot of people out there that are still spewing some of this nonsense. Oops. So I think I was here. Carrot. Did we go past the carrot? And you guys having conversations with yourself. That was it. And been drinking kefir with Ruteri to try to fix gastritis issues, possibly due to H. pylori. Does Ruteri give it survive stomach acid? Yeah, it's a acid-loving bacteria, so yes. Or would it be better to buy Ruteri in pill form? No. Basically, one of the best sources is blue cheese. One of the best sources to get to get some of this sort of stuff back in is blue cheese. It's got some really good bacteria as well. The lactobacillus. Cheeses are really good in that regard in bringing back a lot of lactobacillus that people lose. So due to glyphosate, due to antibiotics, due to a lot of other inappropriate things. So you can actually get, there are different preparations out there. You just got to be very careful with kefirs when you do get kefirs. If somebody else has created, not you, that it doesn't, the type of strain, I'm very dubious about acidophilus because they tend to put acidophilus in everything. And some of the strains of acidophilus can be, let's say, they can play fun with your appetite. They sort of they send signals to the ghrelin, upregulate ghrelin and make you hungrier. So yes, some companies are very dubious and devious in trying to make people eat more, consume more, so energy than they really require, that they really naturally would want, desire. Yes, but got to be careful with, sometimes you need to get HCl in order to drive down H. pylori in that regard. The other thing is to add salt and taurine. Taurine is really good at dealing also and improving the acidity of the stomach. I did a video covering the stomach issues and stuff like that. Go and check it out. Very important, especially when you're dealing with H. pylori. H. pylori will always be in your system. It just needs to be suppressed. You can never really eliminate it completely. But if you keep the acidity, the pH low, it's never going to really come back in any way to really cause any problems. Now, you can do an antibiotic thing like that Australian researcher did, but it's not always as successful in everyone. So there are options. Laszlo Boris, he's a researcher out of UCLA, and he comes from Hungary. He's Hungarian. I've actually shown some of the stuff on my live streams of Laszlo talking, and also one of the other researchers who was showing one of the dogs that they were using deuterium to reverse its cancer. DDW25 is an anti-cancer deuterium-depleted water, which they use on dogs. It's a veterinary anti-cancer therapy that is recognized by the European Union. The only country that won't allow it in is the FDA, because if it was allowed into veterinary use, they would basically then, people would wise up in the US and say, this works for dogs. It reverses cancer. Maybe it will work for humans. And the entire billions and billions and billions of dollars of oncology field would be toast, because the US influences global health policies. So once it got into the US, this knowledge, it would be Red Rover for basically the oncology field as we know it. That's why they are fighting tooth and nail. I mean, this is the ridiculous thing that they actually said to Laszlo. They said to him, when they actually put the submission in, because he was doing it on behalf of the company in Hungary, they said there's no experimental proof, there's no basically research, and unless there's human trials, we can't accept it. And they said, well, we're prepared to fund these trials if you're prepared to authorize it. They wouldn't authorize it. And he actually explained to them that basically it's only water with less deuterium in it. So what harm can it cause? But they never really got back to him. So basically they just ignored, because they couldn't argue the point, so they just ignored, and the FDA is just avoiding the whole subject. Remember, a lot of people in the FDA have worked for the pharmaceutical industry that are in those top positions that have been appointed. They are there to protect the profits of the pharmaceutical industry, big pharma in the US. And they are definitely not going to allow something like DDW25 to get into the US market, even for veterinary uses. You know, they are not going to allow any of that sort of stuff, because once it gets in and the Americans become wised up, people, it won't take long before it gets onto one of the mass media saying, ooh, and at that point, those buggers are toast, and they know it. And there are billions and billions of dollars to be lost, and that is why they're suppressing a lot of that sort of stuff. But, because the Hungarians are part of the European Union, and you have to know about some of the rules of the European Union, even though it was trying to be suppressed by Brussels in the EU, you can't basically take arbitrary measures against a state of the European Union. The European Union still has rights. The countries, they can veto. They got veto rights, and so if push comes to shove, Hungary would have just vetoed it and made it a bigger issue, and then it would have been known internationally because it would have become a veto issue. So basically, they just let it slide. So it's easy just to not make waves and let it slide so it doesn't get any traction. Where if they had opposed it from Brussels, then it would have got traction, because people would have started being talking, what's this thing that Hungary is being hit over the head about? What's this DDW? And people would have asked the question, and slowly it would have filtered through the mass media and all that. That's what they were trying to prevent. And it basically was allowed to happen, and just play it down. Don't make a big issue of it and all that. And so, yes, it is a recognized thing within the EU. And they, if they really had, let's say if it had poor efficacy, it didn't really work really well. It worked sort of, like there are many other so-called, cures for cancer or many other things. And they may have an effect, a slight effect, a low effect, but not substantial to really worry the industry. On those, they would go tooth and nail against it, as we've seen with many other sort of things that people have used, like the cores of nuts and and all sorts of other things. I'm trying to remember the name of the actual component that's in that sort of thing in those nuts, but they went tooth and nail because yes, it has a very minor effect. Like even vitamin D has, has an apoptotic effect. But usually, a lot of these sort of things, they'll make it out as a crackpot. They'll make sham studies where they'll use lower vitamin D levels to make it say, well, to muddy the waters and make it confusing. And that's how they operate. They muddy the waters and making it confusion. But with DDW25, it's deuterium depleted. Once you give that, you start seeing results quite rapidly in dogs. I showed on one of the live the facial tumors reducing. You can't deny that. That would go like wildfire through the media in the US in particular. So that is why they're trying to keep it out of the US. So it's all about the gosh. Cryptic, that's right. Yes, about Jack. Yes, very cryptic. Yes, mate. I also wanted to let you know my interests are in history, various sciences, farming, hunting, electrical stuff. This is primarily, thank you for that. Mechanical stuff, pharmacology, medicine, a wide range, like myself. No, you didn't. But neither did I tell people initially when I meet them. I don't give them a plethora of what in that regard. It's not expected. Having fun with the little things. Yes, he does. Yes, but he's a crackpot. Yeah, apparently he does a whole lot of other weird stuff and wacky stuff. Yes, he's really out there. Let's just leave it at that. Really out there. Llama, how are you? Is anything wrong with drinking hydrogen peroxide? Put a bit of cyanide in it. Does wonders for you. What do you need to... Did tribal man drink hydrogen peroxide? Your body can actually produce the specific amount that you need to deal with any, unless you're very highly deranged. So please don't put stuff in artificially into your body. You know, you may get the dosages wrong and cause yourself issues. So best to leave the body to do that itself. It does do it a very good, well-regulated by genes job. And avoid the cyanide, please. Carnies here in the US refer to those degenerates that work traveling carnivores. Okay. Do they? Oh, is that your little tiff with Wes about suits and other things? Yes. Nasty little bug. Let's put it that way. Shell, good to see you here. Shell's got shades on. Fatnado's here. Good to see you, mate. Been a while. Where are you hiding? What Greek philosophy perspective school do you identify most with? None of them. I'm very eclectic in my thinking. Let me put it that way. You know, all schools did touch on important aspects of human living. Some have strong validity. Some were way out there in some regards. You know, even when you look at some of the Pythagorean schools, they were really way out there in some of their perspectives. So, you know, they were in woo-woo land in some cases without getting into the weeds. But you know, I also looked at German philosophy in the 18th century, but even early in some of the British thinkers, but even some Chinese stuff. So it's surprising how early Chinese philosophers had a lot of similarities with a lot of Greek philosophers and Indian philosophers, and they were asking very similar questions. So very interesting. My perspective is beyond the Greek world, even though the Greek world there were aspects of the Greek world that were very much, that went beyond you could say, the human or human relation levels that all the other philosophies touched in areas in China, and it being imperial type societies or societies unified by kingdoms and stuff like that, it's much harder to have the perspective is going to be more focused on the relationships in those sort of societies and less on questions beyond those aspects. And that's where, probably because of the Greek world having citizens, free citizens and stuff like that, you create an environment where you can actually start thinking about other concepts beyond just human relationships, but also other concepts of, you know, the world around us, how it's constructed, made up of, in a much deeper and more systematic way, because you get the rising up of some of the interplay between engineering and philosophy and other things like that. So very different. I mean, a lot of the ancient Greek philosophers were not just merely, they were scientists, engineers. I mean, the astrolabe is, you know, people think that probably Archimedes was the inventor of the first analog computer. So they were very much not just, you know, for a long time we thought that Greek philosophy was just stood on its own, but in more recent times we've realized that that's not the case. And the more stuff that we find and the more stuff we realize that these people are sort of more all-rounders. And we see the same thing happening in the Renaissance. You know, a lot of these all-rounders emerging. So I think the foundations were laid in the Greek world, and that sort of, and I think that's the reason why things unfolded the way they did throughout history to a large extent. My favorite ancient Greek person is Archimedes. He was a statesman, a philosopher, a scientist, an engineer, a military man. He was an all-rounder. Very inspirational for a young Greek like myself to, where other people, Plato, Socrates and all that. No. For me, Archimedes lived outside his own time. He could think and invent and conceptualize things beyond his own time. That is extremely rare to find people like that. I would say he was even smarter than Einstein. The only difference is he lived in a time when the accumulated cultural knowledge was much lower. And he, even with that less accumulated cultural knowledge, he was able to, dream much bigger dreams. So, yes, I think Archimedes is the greatest of the greatest. That's my personal opinion. Very biased of me, but, Dylan. Body is tightly regulated. Exactly. Yes. The body knows best. I mean, millions and millions of years of evolution to basically create the perfect regulatory organisms on the planet. All organisms are tightly regulated. Otherwise, life would just be snuffed out so quickly. What's wrong with that? I just noticed analytic mind. But Archimedes went around naked in the streets. Well, very good for deuterium depleting, exposing all your body. Very smart man. Yeah, it's just crazy how people think that we've got to the 21st century and the body can't regulate itself anymore. Weird to have those sort of thoughts. Only in the modern era can humans have the thought that the body can't regulate. Maybe it's something to do with the diet and other things, that the body is actually being deranged. Has anybody thought about that? God, that's a revolutionary concept. Horrifying to have such a thought. Ah, yes, it definitely is. You guys have been getting very good education from Professor K, I notice. Very good. Is canned fish an issue with metals? Old canning methods, no. Modern methods with some of the plastic lining and stuff like that can be an issue, depending on what's in there, where it's stored. There's a lot of, you name it. I prefer buying fresh fish but that's not always practical. There is another way of buying fish, snap frozen. So once it comes out on the ship, they cut it all up and they snap freeze it and put it in bags, ready to go. So that's probably your next best. If you can't get fresh fish in your neck of the woods, buy snap frozen. You don't have to get canned. I don't buy canned stuff. The only time, if you're basically waiting for the end of the world or you've got some ideas of that sort, which I don't harbor. But if you're worried that you weren't, in the early COVID days where I was worried, it's going to be locked down, you won't be able to access food very easily, I did go and buy a lot of canned sardines. Yes. In that regard. And I was less worried about those sort of aspects. I was more worried about access to food, at that stage. So I was putting a lot of stuff in the freezer, making sure that I had enough meat, had enough for certain things. But, in that regard, yeah, it's ridiculous. It is ridiculous that a lot of people are still basically talking about the canning sort of stuff. If you find traditional canning, not a problem. Now, you will find in some Eastern European countries traditional canning. So if it's coming from an Eastern European country, it's more than likely traditional canned. The only thing you have to worry about from Eastern European countries, have they put oils in them? Because now they're starting to put oils in some of them and putting little herbs and stuff like that because people want that sort of shit in the West. Yes, so they're catering for a different market. But if they're using traditional canning techniques, no, it's not going to be a problem. There's no issue with metals either or anything like that, unless they're really degraded and old and stuff like that. But most, not an issue. My biggest issue is the lining, if it's plastic lining, and the other issue, oils, and and there are other options. Snap frozen if you can't get fresh. So that's the sort of thing in that regard. Yes, those organs do a great job, Wes. An absolute great job. Yes. Yep, exactly. There is absolutely 70% of the ATP in your kidneys basically goes into recycling a lot of things like uric acid, sodium, bicarbonates and stuff like that. Yeah, it's a fantastic system. As long as you're eating a species appropriate diet, not damaging and glycating to the living daylights out of, like Salad Boy is doing with all that wonderful, wonderful honey. Any negatives we should be aware with onions? Should they be pickled? Preferably, yep, pickled much better. Cooked, fine. I don't have a problem with people cooking them and stuff like that. Pickled is much better because you're going to be getting rid of a lot of the sugar component in that regard. So I don't encourage people consuming too much onion, even though on Saturdays when I have my indiscretion day, so to speak, which is yesterday, I went down, we had pork sausages. Michael, who's a German guy who's got his own store at the Salamanca, he makes really, when he saw us, he said, because it was raining all day and it wasn't as much business, he goes, "Oh, business has arrived." And we go, "G'day, Michael, how are you?" So it was a bit funny. And he always gives us a discount, so we've got a good relationship with him, so we get it slightly discounted from the regular price. And I just usually we have because he gives a bun with the sausage and all that, so I pretty much have the sausage, just grab it with my hands holding the bun under there, throw away the bun in the end, and just basically and I'll eat with my fingers and then wash them later because there's basically some onions which are cooked and they're really nice. I enjoy the cooked onions, so in a barbecue type thing, because it's all grilled. He's got these big grills and he just grills the whole lot. You can see it's in front, no oils or anything like that, so it's really nice. And occasionally I'll put a bit of German mustard on there as well. Very nice. So it's my cheat day, which is basically my ice cream day as well. But you know what? I had no ice cream yesterday. I've been ice cream free currently. And Hello Kitty hasn't created anyone. She's telling me you have too much ice cream, so you got to take a break. So I'm on a ice cream fast currently. It's been forced on me. I did actually walk past the ice cream fridge in the supermarket and I looked at it and I go, "No, don't do it. Keep going." So yes, in that regard, had one of those moments. It was a slip. Is she here? No, she's not. Yes. All of them. It goes way back to the beginning of all mammals. All animals basically in nature have these buffering systems. They can control their pH perfectly. Every single animal on the planet. This myth is just a crazy myth that humans came up with at some point and it stuck. Yeah, exactly. Shell hit alkaline equals marketing BS. Perfectly said. I couldn't say it better. It was basically vegetarian BS and now it's marketing BS in the modern era. But it's just crackpots that came up with this absolute excrement knowledge, as if the body for millions of years didn't know how to regulate these things. All of a sudden, we get to the 20th century, and a whole lot of vegetarians, vegans, and people like that are telling us that the body can't regulate itself. And then marketing takes over, as Shell says, and are continuing the myth, because it's only marketers that can sell alkaline water and all this other crap, even though it's been debunked, even within official allopathic medicine. We're talking about the actual official allopathic medicine. They've debunked it as well. They just say this is just nonsense because they can't see. They know the kidneys buffer all this sort of stuff. It took them a while to actually step up to the table and actually say this is nonsense. But there are still people. I actually saw one lady, a medical doctor, actually talk about the alkaline theory again. And this was on, I can't remember, it was on either Low Carb Down Under or one of the paleo things, or I can't remember. It was very recent. I don't know whether anybody saw it, but g'day, hello Kitty, good to see you here. I did not succumb yesterday to ice cream, that is. And yeah, it just won't die. Even though it's absolute excrement. Yeah, it's ridiculous. She's pushing fruit and veg for the dog. Oh, God. She's a major influencer. Oh, God. You're kidding me. She's trying to kill the poor thing. Cancer rates in dogs and cats is going dramatically up because they're carnivores. They're just not suited for plants. They may eat, like cats may eat, when they get sick, certain green plants for medicinal, for herbetic effects and stuff like that, for and dogs may consume some stuff, but it's because they do have a bit of a scavenger nature, whatever they find in front of them. But generally speaking, they prioritize bones and meats of different sorts. That's what these animals are supposed to eat. I mean, it's just crazy what people are doing to their animals. It's just, and then they call us bad. They are the biggest abusers of animals by making them chronically sick, because that's what they're doing. It's just absolute craziness out there. And you know what? The pet industry is really behind all this because they can see profits. Sick dogs require additional supplements and stuff like that, deficient dogs. Now you've got all these. You've even got taurine supplements now for dogs and cats and stuff like that. You just have to eat the animal foods and you don't need you get the taurine. No, let's just supplement and give them kibble. Absolute craziness. And I had that experience by going into a veterinary service for Lucy recently to get some advice about, vitamin D and other things, because she was locked up for a while. We couldn't trust her to go, that she wouldn't run away in the early days. And, the stuff that I saw, that like the kibble stuff, and they even had vitamin C. And I go, well, nobody's ever supplemented vitamin C for a cat. Now they do, because they're getting scurvy type related. Well, because of all the kibble. The sailors were not, the officers were eating meat and getting vitamin C, while the dry kibble eaters, who were the sailors, were all the ones that didn't have any more fresh food and were eating dried biscuits and other crap like that, and they were the ones getting scurvy. And now they're feeding it to cats and dogs and getting the same stuff, and then they go and supplement them. It's ridiculous. Yeah, it's crazy stuff. Or they don't need to supplement. They just need to give the cats meat. They'll get their vitamin C from there. And as long as they don't have a lot of kibble competing at their receptor sites, like with us, all mammals have the same sort of stuff. It's madness, Deborah. It's just, and they're the ones that are animal abusers. Yes, exactly. Excrement. Yes, very much. Yes. It's simple, just meat. Yeah. Just basically poor cats and dogs are just suffering endlessly. Yes, yes, there are very many out there, Wes, that are really strange people. I've seen a few of them. Um, I know some vegan deterioration, a few others have actually done videos on some of these people, and they're just really wacky. Ah, yes, dogs and cats need a balanced diet as well. Yeah, exactly. Ridiculous. Ah, yes, exactly. According to Salad Boy, very much so. Yes, creates a lot of issues. Look, that's never been proven in that regard because the body's very tightly regulated, so it's not going to have an issue of that sort. It's not related to that. It's just a bad diet, really. It's not related to MMRs either. The Japanese proved that with 2 years abstention, and the rate still kept on going up amongst the ones that never got vaccinated, any of them, for 2 years in Osaka. So pretty much that blew away that theory. And the funny thing was that the next year when they did start, vaccinating, they had a few years that actually things went down a bit. All back to the diet, unfortunately, and stuff like that. They westernized their diet about 20 odd years ago, the Japanese, and saw macular degeneration and a whole lot of other things go through the roof. It's the damn diet that's causing all these modern day diseases. The old Pottinger's cat, after 5 generations, couldn't reproduce. After 3 generations, we're sort of in that. We were seeing all sorts of ailments and strange diseases and stuff like that. Look around what's happening at the moment amongst the very young children that are being born. There are these strange conditions that are emerging, these rare, they call them rare genetic disorders. No, what they are is basically third generation Pottinger's cat syndrome. That's what it is. It's exactly that, the degeneration of the human species, like they did with the cats, what Pottinger did over 5 generations. We've got about 2 generations to reverse all this. These people are destroying the human species. It's just freaking crazy. That's where all these derangements and all that. You go back, it was something like, 1 in 15,000 that may have had some low-grade autism. Now it's something like, 1 in 27 and getting worse. It's an exposure to something. And not a lot of things have changed other than the diet in the last 50 years. So that's the exposure. And that's basically 1.5 generations. A generation is 33 years, just for those who don't know. So it's a bloody exposure. And it's getting worse, unfortunately. So it's frightening, to say the least. Hey, Harry, what are your main difference between Novavax and Covaxin in regards to production and safety? They're more or less the same. I do not know what the production facility is like. Look, the reality is, let me put it this way: impurities. People are talking about impurities now, and I actually commented about, what was it? Was it a bit over a week now? I did comment to somebody, and I actually gave them some of the information in regards to some of the arguments, supposedly, of impurities from some of their production facilities, Novavax. Now, Novavax actually produces the vaccines, but they don't produce it. They don't have production facilities. They sold their production facilities a number of years ago. So they outsource the production. They outsource it to India. They outsource it to other US companies and all that. That's where the arguments are happening with, basically. I actually pinned a comment for that person, an Indian company, the Indian company that's actually producing that variety, that actually talked about that the FDA is holding up, and it's in regards to impurities, but they didn't hold up Moderna. Moderna had the same issues because they were outsourcing and they had similar issues, but they ticked and flicked them. So they didn't, but they had more influence, political influence. That's the difference. Every single supplement manufacturer has similar issues. The problem is in factories, even processed food. You buy a processed pizza, you buy snacks like crisps or whatever. every single food item that you've ever eaten in your life that is processed in a package of any sort that's come out of a factory, whether it's chocolate or whatever, has some impurities in it. It's just a manufacturing process. You want low impurities? Go to a chip maker. People that are producing, 1 or 2 nanometer, computer chips, so fabrication technology of that sort, they have clean rooms, absolutely clean rooms, where the air pressure is controlled to prevent any particulates, impurities getting in. Any other manufacturing, supplement makers, you've had supplements. In some of the supplements, they've even got more impurities in supplements than in vaccines. Get over it. And if you've ever eaten crisps and all that from a factory, there's going to be filings, some metal filings and all sorts of things, very minor, in the dust, and you can get this sort of stuff in. You can actually find even severe stuff. People have found it, actually taken it back and made videos on the TV or shown it on TV or whatever. So where there's been, not impurities, we're talking about like a horrendous amount of stuff that shouldn't be there. So manufacturing in itself creates a lot of particulates. The gears on equipment, all these sort of things create things, and they float around in it's a very unhealthy environment actually to work in a manufacturing facility that does a lot of this sort of stuff. There's a lot of particulates. People should wear masks if they do work in those environments. They require and periodically go out and get some fresh air. But the reality is there's a lot of impurities and particulates. And so, yeah, if you want perfect manufacturing, it's going to cost you an arm and a leg, not cheap. And the reality is our bodies can cope. You stand behind a vehicle in New York, which blows out all these particulates. You suck that into your lungs. You know how much particulates you're getting? Hundreds of times more than what you'd get from one of these vaccines or even one of the supplements. Your body can detox a lot of this sort of stuff and deal with it. Obviously accumulative. If you really want to reduce the accumulative damage over time, get out of New York, I would say, and worry less about some jab or some supplement which has got very low impurities in particular in comparison. We live in a modern world. We are bathed in impurities, in particulate matter of different types. It's just a reality. So, but I think there's more competition in terms of Pfizer, Moderna, all these companies which are literally giving money hand over fist to different, and Pfizer, Moderna, and these companies have got more influence in FDA. They try to keep their competition out by just putting obstacles up, saying, oh yeah, you've got this issue and all that. Why was Moderna's, they had just as bad impurities, actually probably even worse, in one of their facilities, and were told to clean it up, and then they were given the green light after, when they confirmed that they'd cleaned it up. Nobody checked, because it was basically, it's like the onus is on the people doing it. So FDA doesn't really check that much. So I think it's more looking after the interests of some of the other competition rather than anything else. And obviously some of the manufacturers in India and some of the manufacturers in the US are complaining, that are producing the product for Novavax, are complaining along these lines. Who knows who's right, who's wrong, who's telling the truth, who's not, who's playing silly buggers. It's really hard to work that sort of stuff out in that regard. But in terms of impurities in production, they exist in every single bloody industry, and the supplement makers are even worse. So another reason not to overdo the supplements and only use them sparingly for short term, for interventions to fix deficiencies, and then basically get back to real food, as I've been saying for quite some time now. So yes, that is pretty much the reality of that sort of stuff. So it's, people make a big fuss about a lot of things, and then they sit in traffic while they're ingesting all these other particulates in New York. I'm not taking that because it's going to kill me. Yeah, but you're still ingesting a whole lot of other shit particulates. Yeah, so, Yeah, people make too much fuss of things that way. I think it's just competition and monopolistic interests being looked after more than anything else. So, because look at the trial. Look at the trial data. What did the trial data show? No anaphylaxis, none of this sort of stuff. Really showed good results. So, far better results than the trials of Pfizer and Moderna and all that. They had a lot of side effects. Johnson & Johnson, a lot of side effects with people. So, yeah. That should basically tell you that, it's a bit of a beat up. Don't know why. Just seems crazy. And even the Australian government are pushing hard for the mRNA technology. So they're actually putting money, they've put money behind it. And that's why they reduced their orders of Novavax to 15 million. So whether they'll actually provide Novavax access to Australia in future is questionable with the way they're going, because they're trying to push CSL to go down the mRNA pathway. So, yeah, not good. Yes, our Vagoon friends. Yes. Lather yourself in honey as well, Robert. Yes. Best thing to do is remove the entire bottom of the food pyramid, just keep the top. And add sun salt, and and basically meat. Easiest way to deal with that one. Is DHA useful for connective tissue? I think Jack said something in that direction. Look, it is important. Both omegas are important in those sort of areas. They're not the most critical stuff, but they are important. They're a factor that is required, and for a number of biological processes as well. DHA is also very important, what Jack would be talking about in terms of melanopsin in the eyes, and also for the good functioning of the eyes as a receptor. So when there's a lot of blue light, it can reduce the DHA. And we're also exposed to non-native EMF. So the frequencies that actually tend to degrade, and at night you tend to increase, and the receptor sites can be degraded by non-native or blue light exposure at night and stuff like that, which isn't a good thing. And so the requirement for DHA goes up in our modern world as a consequence. Now, how much, we don't know, because we've never measured it with studies. So we've got no idea, but it's important. So I just say to people, add some additional servings of fish in your diet every week, like 2 extra servings. So, because most people have no fish whatsoever. So adding, 2 servings of sardines is probably all you bloody need, especially if you're limiting the other blue light exposures. Well, you can't limit the stuff from your electrical wiring, unfortunately. Yeah, but if you can minimize it, I get these more expensive light bulbs, which tend to have also reduced EMF as well, which is good. So you get double bang for your bucks, so to speak. Yes, they are a bit pricey. You can go for the cheaper ones, about 10, 15 bucks, but they don't have that feature. You still get non-native EMFs, but you get reduced blue light from the actual light source itself. So there are differences. I'd prefer going the full hog, reducing that sort of stuff. So, yes. Interesting stuff. But its importance is, there's some importance, but the deuterium level is far more important in my belief system, because even if you're having grass-fed, animal foods, you will get some DHA far more than the general population. In that regard, and you can actually mitigate to some extent, or even on your screen, with a number of applications that can reduce the blue light, or you can get glasses like I do, either these sort of for afternoon, which I use, or the evening ones. So there are options, all sorts of things. to reduce the reduction of DHA. Yes, I know a lot of people balk at blue cheese, but I like it. Exactly, they are pretty much. That's what lactobacillus, every single one are acid-loving bacteria. So yes, they have no problems whatsoever. And your mummy, when you come out of the birth canal, coats you with all these acid-loving, and the birth canal area has a certain level of acidity. It's a protective thing as well, so against pathogens. But this acidic environment is it's densely populated with lactobacillus. And so if you come out naturally, you basically, the first bacteria that you acquire are these acid-loving bacteria. It's a great start in life. So really important. Some doctors are recognizing this nowadays, not as many as there should in gynecology. And they will literally, as the child is, if it doesn't come out naturally, what they will do is they will put into the vaginal cavity. They will actually, they've got, what do they call that? There's some sort of, some sort of material. I can't remember what it is. And just think of it as like some sort of material, which is like a, hand wipe or stuff like that. And they will wipe get all the lactobacillus, and they will wipe the child as they bring, it comes out. So it gets all the, when it's not naturally birthed, trying to remember the name, brain fog, and they'll basically coat all the child, with these beneficial bacteria. And that is a great way to start life, because otherwise you get the skin ones from the mother, and they are, a lot of them quite pathogenic, can be, like streptococcus and stuff like that. And you don't want that sort of stuff to be in your early gut microbiome as a child. So really, really important. And then we go through life basically with glyphosate, kibble, and misuse and overuse of antibiotics, and not getting enough sun, vitamin D, and B vitamins to basically maintain a good gut microbiome. And yes, we make a mess of it. And then we, as many young teenagers now have a lot of gut problems compared to the past. Yes, and they are also eating less of quality dairy, because we used to have really good quality dairy, raw dairy. As a youngster, I grew up with raw dairy products, so we always had good levels of lactobacillus varieties in our diet. Young kids now have something which is Frankenstein dairy, which is highly pasteurized. Then they put a whole lot of sugar in it. They put things like flavorings, whether it's chocolate flavoring or whatever. They call that milk. I classify that as some sort of Frankenstein creation. And then they give them these. If you look at modern cheese today, it's rubber. It doesn't look like cheese. It tastes like cheese because they put some sort of coloring in, but it really isn't cheese. It's sort of some sort of rubbery, some sort of another Frankenstein food, which is devoid of really any good nutrients or beneficial bacteria. Yeah, and they wonder why people have got so many gut problems and issues. Yes, the lactobacillus varieties are very important in restoring those. That's where the B vitamins, they really love B vitamins and produce B vitamins. You really need to give them what they want. But if you can get raw cheeses and stuff like that, it's another great way of actually delivering those to your gut. Yes. Oh, yes, exactly, Lukey. Please hit the like button. Or if you're a Vagoon, the dislike. The AI will love you for it. The YouTuber AI. It will fall head over backwards, and literally have a party. Broke out the brie cheese. Granddaughter, damn, nearly ate the whole damn thing. So now I buy two. Damn children. At least she's getting some good quality cheese. That's the main thing. Yes. I mean, Greeks. Yeah, the Greek world is really a cheese world. So you can go all the way back to Homer's epic poems of the Iliad and the Odyssey, and you can see, pastoral traditions and cheese making being talked about, and even the Cyclops basically was, Odysseus had to went in and stole his cheese, so that's Poseidon's son. Trying to remember his damn name. Can't remember his name. Cheese is my drug. I have to say mine as well. my fridge is just full of cheeses. So, yeah. I can relate to that, Shell. G'day, Asian Experience. Any plans to go on the Food Lies podcast with Brian Sanders? Not at this stage, mate. I haven't actually been invited, or I may next time I actually have a chat with Mary. I know she's doing a bit of research at the moment and touring around and doing stuff like that, but I haven't, because I've been so damn busy recently, I just haven't had the time, but I do plan to get in touch with her. And I was actually considering asking her to ask Brian whether to get me on. So we'll see how that goes. So nothing set in concrete at the moment, but we'll see how that plays out. It would be good in that regard to discuss certain aspects that a lot of people don't talk about. A bit of my background and experience and stuff like that, but also some of the things that I find interesting, and maybe even, I don't know. I don't know really what he's interested in. It is a Food Lies podcast, so it would have to be focused on maybe some of the food traditions of Greece in that regard. Some of the ancient traditions that I've actually discovered and understood. So maybe going into some of that sort of stuff, because a lot of people, I did do a video which was called the Carnivorous Greeks, or the ancient Carnivorous Greeks, or something along those lines. And so he may have an interest in looking at the research that I looked into, which is the N15 isotope analysis, showing that they primarily consume ruminant animals and some coastal fish, but a very small amount of coastal fish. So it's a lot of people think Greece fish, and they don't even think dairy. They think fish and basically plants, which is, or olive oil, which is just nonsense. Olive oil in ancient times was not used for the rich, like the Italian rich used to use it as a novelty to sprinkle on certain foods, but it was pretty much animal foods that were used to cook. I mean, up until the 20th century, my father was still larding with his mother in the mountainous areas. Greece is very mountainous, so it's very much pastoral in that regard. But yeah, most people are unaware of some of these traditions, so it'd be those sort of things that I'd show them if he was interested in some of the raw cheeses around the Greek world. There's some mountainous regions close by to where I lived, which was a sort of a lowland area, but we used to access. And these areas just have all these different varieties of cheeses, many that people are completely unaware of, the dairy tradition of Greece. I've shown in one of my chats with Bart K about some of this pastoral tradition, and actually showed that Greeks were consuming about the same amount of milk that the Swiss consume. they're the only ones that have very high consumption rates of milk compared to other people in the Mediterranean. So it's there's a lot of things that people have a very skewed idea of that part of the world. I mean, Mary's Ruddock, she's gone to Ikaria and seen how these old people are eating organ meats and pork belly and all this sort of stuff in these sort of village areas. And they are pastoralists. They've got a different tradition. And the only sort of plants is seasonal, and it's some vegetables which they cook. They never have raw. And it's, it's like adding to the animal foods, like some variety. It's not really the actual food itself. And she was enlightened by seeing and experiencing those things. So it's really important that people really get a true picture of that world. Something that I got as well as a youngster, actually even herding goats. So it was an experience that not many people ever have. So my auntie, Arigiro was her name. She's passed away now. And Thea Arigiro. Arigiro is her actual, we used to call her Arigiro, Thea Arigiro. Thea is auntie in Greek. But her actual name, because we used to shorten it, but her actual name is Arigiro. So I do miss her. She was a really salt of the earth, really, really good-hearted person. She'd do anything for you, so yeah, one of my favorite aunts, let's put it that way. And it's thanks for bringing that memory back. Yeah, something to think about. You never know, you may see me there. Gwyneth, how are you, mate? Do you think bacteria on meat is a significant issue? Nah. If you're cooking it, unless you're having it raw, I always say if you're having raw meats, like I do sometimes, you need to know your source. Get it from a good source. If you're not, cook it. You don't have to overcook it to get rid of these sort of pathogenic types. But, if you're getting supermarket meat, it's going to go through a slaughterhouse. It's going to go through a lot of different hands, and potentially not everybody's going to be basically very hygienic. So it's always best. But if you're getting it directly from a farmer who's, immediately slaughtered in that environment, you've taken it, you've made sure that you've, having it raw under those circumstances wouldn't be a problem. But you got to be very careful with sourcing. Unfortunately, in today's world, it's very different than what it was in the past. I'm inclined to believe it's only an issue if you have a compromised digestive system, that as well, to inappropriate diet. Yep, that is definitely a lot of truth in that as well. If you don't have, we used to be scavenger carnivores, really. We did, and also we have the sort of scavenger sort of level of pH of 1.5 or lower. So if you've got a good digestion, the majority of people today do not. That's just the reality. Unless, if you've been a Maasai or you've been an Inuit and you've had from birth to now a species appropriate diet, you will have a really good digestive system. But if you've got any even minor issues, it's probably compromised, and you don't really know how compromised. It's best to give it that sort of stuff a miss as raw, because I suspect that's what you mean. You haven't explained whether it's clearly on the raw, because if you cook stuff, it's not going to be an issue. But it's really with the raw food eaters, and I do consume some raw stuff myself. But to deal with that, you definitely have to have good stomach acidity. That's a given. And if you had prior issues, you will never be 100%. I usually say you need about 5 years to be on a species appropriate diet and have resolved all those gut issues properly, have a good vitamin D status, have a good B vitamin status initially to resolve some of the early stages of, do kefirs and stuff like that, do fermented cheeses and stuff like that, try and get beneficial bacteria back into the system to sort things out. And at that stage, yeah, things should work pretty well. It shouldn't be an issue. Even if it's, you're not 100% about the source, because even if there is something there, your digestive system will sort it. But I don't recommend it in general, because I don't know what people's state of gut microbiome they are. Because we used to just catch animals and then slaughter them and then pretty much eat them over a couple of days if they were big, like mega beasts. So they would basically, bacteria would increase in them. As meat ages, bacteria increases. So yes, they are an issue if you have a poor digestive system. That's definite. So yeah, it's a question of sorting it out. And that's another kettle of fish, and it depends on a lot of factors. So I've sorted people, and some people have taken longer, like months to sort out, and other people through emails back and forth, and other people have resolved things much faster. So it really depends your starting point. So that's the other thing. You usually know your starting point, and there may have to be some tests as well. But if you've got like really things that need to be resolved properly, that need coaching, I usually say to people, go to Bart. He does this as a full time and do consultancy with him. I usually just answer my emails every Wednesday, and if I miss you on one Wednesday, it'll be the next Wednesday. And it basically is just a general thing. So it's not continuously interactive. You'll get a reply, and then you may have to wait for a week before you get another reply. So it can be drawn out. But if you want a proper consultation, go to Bart. I used to do some stuff free in the past, but I just didn't have the time. So I stopped doing them. It's just a matter of having the time to do things. So, yes. No, not really. Not really. It's not for mycotoxins, stuff like that. We're not talking about like beans and basically peanuts and stuff like that. Can you get mycotoxin contamination in these sort of things? That's a possibility, in some modern manufacturing. But if you get good quality blue cheese done in more traditional ways, you're not going to get any problems in that regard, because both the strains that they're using are quite beneficial for the body, so you don't have to worry about llama. Oh, look, I don't hate the FDA. There are good people that work at the FDA, don't get me wrong, but they're a powerful interest group. Like their senior managers, their directors, the people that actually run the show, that set the policy and all that, those really top people, a lot of those are industry players. So government has appointed them. See, the problem is, in the past, bureaucracy was more independent from industry. Government would appoint bureaucrats who came within the ranks of the bureaucracy. And so somebody who had been in the bureaucracy, the FDA, for, let's say, 20 years would eventually become senior manager. It was a sort of a tenure. You got higher and higher as you were in a bureaucracy for longer and longer. Then through the 90s in particular, there was and then in the 2000s, there was this sort of concept, and it was promoted by Republicans in particular, and conservative politicians around the world, like Thatcher and people like that in their days, that the people in the public service are just, they're useless. The public servants, they just don't have the same thinking that people in the private sector have. So what they did was they appointed a lot of their friends in the private sector that were benefiting them into these top positions, and they corrupted the public service, and no longer was the public service independent from industry, like to some extent it had been in the past, not entirely, but to more. And that's how they corrupted, by putting their own, let's say, friends in high places, which then basically looked after their mates in industry. And that's when they ceased to be an independent and doing their job according to the law. And laws were sort of, you could say, they were eroded in different ways. So, yeah. As I said, I'm a very eclectic in my politics, and I will criticize people on the right and the left when they fuck up in policies. And this was a big fuck up on the right, on the conservative side of politics, that basically they thought that, they just don't understand government. Government is not there basically to serve industry. It's there to serve the people as best as possible. That means, yes, it does mean that you need a good industry policies as well, because people still need employment and stuff like that. But it has to be a balance. When you go too far the other way by appointing a whole lot of industry people, and that's what they did in America. Now, pretty much the heads of the FDA, if you take a look at their CV, they are all connected back to a lot of the pharmaceutical industries. That's the problem. They're not people that have come through the bureaucracy like in the past, independent of these and independently, running these organizations to do their job in accordance to the laws of the land. That's the problem. These organizations have been corrupted, unfortunately, at the top. And people below may protest. There are some people that have actually left the FDA, good people that have complained about being interfered with or pressured to do certain things that they don't want to do. Again, because the political system has become very corrupt now. If you go back to, when Roosevelt was around, Eisenhower, all these people, whether left or right, didn't make any difference. Those politicians were statesmen. They truly understand you really need to run a proper state. In the latter part of the 20th century and early part of the 21st century, the political establishment has become very crony capitalism and crony politicians, and very corrupt, looking out for themselves. And I think most people detected that. Most people have realized that the system is in decline, that the system has become very endemically corrupt from what it was. Far more today than what it was in the past. There's always been corruption in human societies, but far more. We're in this, what they call civilization decline. I think I mentioned it last time about how they used to venerate in ancient Rome before the end. Even the cooks and the gladiatorial games went to the next level. Well, what's happening now? So, sort of reality TV off the show, cooks off the show. You look at all these other civilizations, a lot of similarities, I would say, and corruption off the show as well. And that's what we're seeing in the political establishment and in industry and everything, just corruption beyond a joke. Forget about buying politicians. You've bought the whole government now. That's how bad it is. And that's the problem. And it was all this sort of stuff that, we can appoint these people because they're going to innovate the public service. They're going to transform the public service. No, all they did was corrupt the living daylights out of it. That's all they did. I never saw any innovation in the public service. Has anybody else seen any innovation, great innovation? No. All they did was corrupt the living daylights out of the top leadership. And today, the public service is basically yes men for the minister and good friends of different industry groups. That's the reality. It's just a fucking joke. Politicians corrupted and businessmen corrupted pretty much the independence of government. That's the problem, Daniel. That's why it's so bad. It's basically they are criminals, pretty much. But they are because they've been corrupted by industry. There's no independence anymore of the public service like there was in the past. In the past, even in Britain, you couldn't actually appoint the head of the public service. They were independently came through the ranks. They gave independent advice, whether governments liked it or not. Now politicians want their yes men to tell them what they want, and they are in the hands, and they also get kickbacks, all of them, and presents and all sorts of things from their industry mates. And sometimes they don't get them directly. They make sure their wives get them so they're not visible. Yeah. So yes, unfortunately, that's the reality. a bit different, but what are your thoughts on piezoelectricity and the potential for conformal devices, better diagnostics, and potential steps in miniaturizing objects? Yeah, can be useful. I remember one thing that I did like once was a sort of a piezoelectric device to actually move a ship, where, there was another thing that I did think about, a concept of basically, we talk about solar panels, but solar panels only work when the sun is out. What about piezoelectrics? Little hairline structures on a surface that basically can vibrate and create electricity from just the air molecules going past. Wouldn't somebody think of something like that? So yeah, there you go. HD, food for thought. But the potential is quite innovative, even in miniaturized devices. Currently, if you take a look at a lot of the nanotechnology, it's sort of like the equivalent of what analog computers were in ancient Greece. Sort of like they just do simple mechanical movements or whatever. So yeah, they're not going to do really manipulative, complex things at this stage. But with piezoelectrics, you could potentially provide localized sort of energy to have little components, little type, a bit like, enzymes and all that can have the ability to utilize energy in a very localized way. So it has a lot of potential. It has a lot of potential in that regard. Especially in the realm of miniaturization, to give different components certain types of energy, and at the same time be able to do certain functions that the simple type analog steps that are, or reactions or movements that are done within these sort of miniature stuff are sort of limited in some regards. So it's interesting, let's put it that way. I've looked into it, but that's not the focus of this channel. So it's an interesting area. If you want to talk more about it, come to my Zoom session. We talk about all sorts of things, philosophy, politics, all sorts of things when it comes to that. I even showed them this recently. Afghanistan, saving Afghanistan, how to flip the Taliban. Look at the year. July to August 2009. This is actually put out, Foreign Affairs, by, those think tanks that actually think about, the foreign relations, Council of Foreign Relations. It's those people that the bankers are behind and all that sort of stuff. Yes, they are the sort of people that think about this sort of stuff. They were thinking about flipping the Taliban all the way back like that. And then the strategy 2 years after that came out. Nobody really heard about it, but it did come out. And then it was followed. And it was actually talked about in Foreign Affairs again. It's their magazine. They talk amongst themselves. So if you really want to know what the rulers of America or, UK, the Anglosphere or whatever, thinking about some of this sort of stuff, and even some of their supporters in some of the banking circles and some of the others, the World Economic Forum and all that, come to this magazine. It'll actually tell you what they're really thinking before they actually have told everyone else. And a few years later, you actually see it happening. Yes. Interesting. Anyway, can you foresee bringing up conversations about DDW as an effective cancer treatment will just help me get targeted as a fringe individual? People just wouldn't believe it. I think if you actually just said it like that, people would not believe it. They would think you are absolutely loony. Get the straitjacket out, lock him up. That's exactly what I actually mentioned that to somebody that, deuterium depleted water could be an effective cancer treatment. And I had got the filthiest looks. People were just looking at me funny, and I'm going, okay, these people think I've just walked out of the loony bin. Yeah, unfortunately, people just don't understand quantum biology or what's really happening. at the quantum level, what do you think the electron chain, or where you create energy? It's all about protons and electrons, fundamentally, and not having any neutrons in there from deuterium causing problems. So yeah, at the fundamental level, that's what it is: energy production. Food turns into energy, into these subatomic molecules that then go through these systems that produce energy. Yes. But unfortunately, most people are very ignorant when it comes to, well, they don't have to be not. I mean, somebody's a lawyer or an accountant or whatever. Do they need to know about this sort of stuff in terms of their job? No, they don't. So, but they will be, they're not stupid. They're just ignorant. They're not aware of the information. And also it's not promoted in society in that regard. So yeah, it is viewed as a fringe thing. Yes, unfortunately. You guys are sort of, you've come along on the journey with me, and so you don't view it in that way. You really, now, the amount of time I've talked about it and explained different aspects, you're really more cluey about it. But outside that sort of realm, yeah, it's yes, you get strange looks, Lukey. You get strange looks, So you sort of, I always say, start them slow on other things and develop them from biochemistry to quantum biology. It takes time for people to go there, because people struggle with other things, let alone those sort of complicated things. Sometimes it's very hard to get your head around it. How can it work like that? So, yes. I did actually, at my Zoom session, I really explained it in quite some detail of that mechanism, but it was like a long-winded, but it really went into the crux of some of this sort of stuff. But you need to turn up if you want to learn some really deep and meaningful things. I've never tried blue cheese, but I'm gonna. You'll enjoy it. I hope you do. It's really good stuff. I was also reluctant to drink kefir. I thought it would taste like spoiled milk, but it just tastes like yogurt. Exactly. Yeah, it's watery yogurt type thing. Yes, very nice as well. The thing, I actually have to search and try and find, there were some really, I'll get back. There's a couple of things in terms of kefir. It is a video that I want to make eventually at some point, some of our own experiences, but sort of a low priority, but I will at some point. And I do want to do some research in kefir types around the world as well, to see what's available, what exists and stuff like that, and sources. Is there much lactose across all dairy products, or just in all dairy products? Actually, you get more in cheeses and stuff like that than you get in milk. Sorry. I was thinking lactobacillus, lactoferrin. Oh, sorry. I'm not sure. Lactoferrin. I know colostrum. So the early milk, around about the spring period, is much higher in that regard in lactoferrin. I suspect it would depend what the source of milk at which time of the year. It's like a bit like, your K2. Again, it's the same reason. It's the sort of the green grass. I think that's in spring where you get a lot of the green grass, which is very, very high in omega-3s, very high in a number of the fatty acids as well, in the K2 as well. And which was the thing that Western Price called Activator X. So it's in those sort of pastures in that period of time. Yes, there would be higher of those nutrients compared to winter milk, as an example. So that's a hard, it's a hard one to basically, like cheeses. Some of the companies do put the packaging, the date when it was actually packaged. And what you have to do is from the date of packaging, you have to sort of extrapolate like a week before or something like, a couple of days before. And it usually will tell you, I know there are people on this planet that will look at that specific period of time, and they will buy shitloads of stuff, dairy products of that period, and store it. So like butter, my whole year's supply of butter will be from that period, as an example. Now, I have done that a bit myself, like looked at the date and said, okay, this is at that sort of date. It's going to have more lactoferrin. It's going to have more MK4 and stuff like that. And I'll buy it, and I'll just get bulk amounts and stick it in my fridge. And I usually have, and I do keep the temperature slightly lower than others, down to 1 degree. And pretty much I've got my butter there for a couple of months in that regard. So I tend to do a bit of that, but you have to find butter that is actually. But I've become a bit lazier in recent times, but I used to do that far more. Maybe I should go back to doing it. But yeah, that's going to be the best period for all dairy in terms of lactoferrin. It's really the period of the year that, in a sense, Dylan. I think I like that homitic eye damage from the sun gazing. Exactly. Yeah, weird, so this is a strange thing that I sometimes like. Jack says, oh, if you're in a vehicle and you open up like the top of the windshield, or your windows down and all that, because light rays can actually bounce off different surfaces and get to your eyes anyway. So he says, if you're in a car, if you've opened up the the top, the roofing top or whatever, you're gonna basically get. But then he says, don't wear. You should never wear basically sunglasses, because you're gonna. I'm going. You're still getting light coming through the sides and all that. So what's the difference between the car and the sunglasses? You're still. I'm going. It just never gelled to me, sort of. People have these strange things that, but then the light rays will bounce off and still get there. But if you're wearing sunglasses, not the case. And I'm going, I don't know. People come up and I go, where's the science for that? Show me the science that doesn't get, if I'd noticed like there was nothing coming to my eyes, yeah, but maybe the real wraparound types may be an issue. Maybe. If it's always amused me how people talk about these things sometimes. Yeah. Anyway, move on. I'm aware of familiar with material science. Yeah, states of being better bind to surfaces and power themselves using object polarity. Interesting for nanomedicine, where HD, we're way away from a lot of that sort of stuff at this stage anyway. Currently, it's only that we have very sort of miniature cameras we can send in little. There's a new device that actually can go in, sort of create like a balloon thing and then pull out a lot of plaque sort of thing. Something that I'm actually doing a bit of looking into it. It's trial type stuff. Could radically change, eliminate cardiovascular surgery completely. So yes, interesting stuff. Probably should do a video on it at some stage. Another one for the list. Yeah, many people in the aging science community are woefully ignorant of deuterium, mitochondrial health. Exactly. Very few understand it, let alone when you're talking about blue light. There's a bit, screen, watching screens, not good for your eyes, and it makes them tired and stuff like that. They talk about a lot of this, and even some of the ophthalmologists now do talk about it. But the more deeper aspects of light are missed completely. Non-native EMFs and sort of the electromagnetic frequencies that are problematic as well. They miss that. Then you've got crackpots out there making confusing stuff about heat shock proteins, which there are with EMFs. There are zero. That's oxidative stress. Zero. I've did with Bart K1 on that specifically. So it's the frequencies, not all these other so-called radiation stresses and whatever. Non-existent. That's just bullshit. But because these are not non-penetrating, they don't have. It's the actual spectrum. It's the part of the blue light type, the non-native. That means when the planet is actually rotating around the sun, you basically get this near infrared. You go from blue to this orange near infrared type. The spectrum changes, the frequencies change. That is what your melanopsin basically detects and synchronizes its internal clocks, its circadian clocks and all that. So that's what you're mucking up, that people don't understand about light. And that's where non-native EMF, it's a small problem, but if you've got too much exposure, then it can become a bit, and some people are more sensitive than others. That's the only difference. But fundamentally, mitochondria is going to be far more important. That's where we have disagreements with people like Jack. But anyway, it's always interesting, those conversations. I suspect it would be an interesting debate, let's put it that way, if it ever happens. But at the same time, he'd be talking gibberish and I'd be talking plain English, and that would be confusing people because they wouldn't understand what's happening. It'd be interesting. Maybe it would force Jack to basically talk a bit less gibberish. Yeah, don't know. I don't think he would turn up anyway. As I said, I don't disagree with his science. I disagree with his emphasis and his approach in delivering. It's a sort of it's more of a criticism. It's a criticism on the way he delivers things, and it's a critique on the emphasis of the importance of, because he also believes in deuterium. He's aware of Laszlo Boris's sort of promotion of the deuterium depletion protocols and stuff like that, and what he's been involved, because Laszlo runs all these like the seminars and the conferences on deuterium in Hungary. So he's well aware of those. D'Agostino's well aware of them because he's actually gone to he was invited to one of the conferences. So yeah, he's well aware of them as well. But I don't think a lot of these people really understand them. They go to them, they hear them and all that, and it's sort of like they're still in their own little low-carb keto world in the way they view things, but they haven't made the proper connections. What is happening at the subatomic, they're still thinking in biochemistry, they're not thinking in biophysics, and so they're missing a lot of things in the way the body works and the relative importance. But anyway, that's for another day. Sean, how are you, mate? If you're doing a fatty acid profile test while losing weight, where is the breakdown of such omega-6 coming from, previously stored fat and current diet? As you said, it depends where the sourcing is. Obviously, if you're activating hormone-sensitive lipase and you've got lower insulin and you're in a low carbohydrate state, a proportion of that is going to come from the adipose tissue, from your fat cells. And depending on what you consumed in the past, the sourcing of that could be from it's stored omega-6 from seed oils. I've always said if you're losing weight and you've had exposure to seed oils in the past, you should be on a low dose vitamin E from jarrow. So if you go to iHerb and put the taco, I'll put it actually in the description. I'll actually put the actual Jarrow site, and then you can just search it on whatever platform you're on. So I'll leave that choice up to you, which platform you want to source it from, whether Amazon or whether iHerb, because, you know, just check them, the different sites, and see what prices they've got practically. So that's the product, and it's got a mixed. It's sourced from pretty much palm oil, and it's got a mixed both the tocopherols, which is the the major one, and also the tocotrienols as well. So they are a different size type. You know, the different tocotrienols come in different sizes, different lengths. The little wiggly things that will actually bind into the actual cell membranes in different lengths, in different depths in the bilayers, and they can electron done. So it's basically, the other ingredients are palm oil, basically soft cell bovine gelatin, so it's animal-based gelatin, glycerin, purified water, so, and a sort of a castor oil as well. So, and some of the stuff does come from that in terms of the vitamin E as well. So it's a complex, a vitamin E complex, and that's how you want to get it. You do not want to get just plain old, tocopherol. You don't need a lot. You actually need more of the tocotrienols, which most people don't get because they don't get a complex. So very important to get your so from either real food or to get it in this supplemental form that also is derived from real food to deal with. And I usually say to people, if you've been exposed to seed oils for a very long time, Sean, you should basically be on a low dose Jarrow for at least 5 years minimum. I would say even better, 7 years, because of stored poof around the tissue, cell membranes in your skin, which makes you more susceptible to burning as well, and other organs around the body. So you really need to stabilize those with electron doning, and that's what this stuff can do. If you maintain lower vitamin, also lower insulin, because you're low carbing, you're on a species appropriate diet, what will happen is your body will basically electron done and also upregulate glutathione, which will regenerate, recycle this sort of stuff. That's why you only need a low dose, and as a complex, which is much safer anyway. High doses of vitamin E can be a problem as well, but I won't go into that. You really need a certain amount, because they come, like all of them, they can become pro-oxidants and create all sorts of issues. And I did explain last night at my Zoom session. If people were at my Zoom session, they would have learned what is in one of my future videos about the problems with NAC and with high doses of, and it's not only oxalates in terms of high dose of vitamin C either. So you would have learned something. Anyway, see what you're missing when you don't turn up to my Zoom meetings, people. Very nuanced information which doesn't even appear on the live streams, because I bring it up, you don't ask the question, so you don't get the answer. But in those cases, the Zoom sessions, we have colorful conversations about all sorts of things. So you're missing a lot by not turning up. Your loss, not mine. I'm doing those Zoom sessions for you guys. So in that regard, yes, many great thinkers of the past. Now, I've never really been into Stoicism. Well, some aspects I do appreciate, but there are some aspects that I don't. Ah, yes, great person. Curious to see the parallels in thought between Greek concepts of democracy, Ethiopian Roma systems. Yeah, I probably should look into. Yeah, I could actually bring that up in a Zoom session. I'll leave it there. This is a nutritional channel, health and nutrition. So even though I do dabble a bit in that sort of stuff, but that would be a long conversation, and probably for a Zoom session. Come along, HD, and ask me, and let's have a conversation about some of this sort of stuff. So you're missing out. Ah, yes. What's wrong with that? You're a bigot, mate. You're a bigot. Let it all out. Enjoy the sun. Let it all hang out, mate. Exactly. See, Archimedes was very wise. Sunbake those balls, Yes, giving himself extra testosterone. No shame. Exactly. Show her nakedness, and yes, and she appears taking notes. G'day, Helen. Also, the idea that the human body can regulate without external specialists. Help. Great marketing idea. Yeah, it's really, incredible, Helen. It's really crazy that people can believe that the body can regulate itself all on its own. It doesn't need a specialist. Where would we be without specialists? Healthier. Say no more. What do you think there's an issue with using microwaves to heat up leftover meats? In terms of radiation, all this sort of other nonsense, no. In terms of standing close to one with the non-native EMFs, I wouldn't stand anywhere near it. There are certain frequencies that can be incorporated in that if you're ever in daylight, it's not going to be an issue. But in the evening in particular, there's photonic energy that may be out of circadian mismatch. That's a sort of another kettle of fish in quantum biology. So if you're going to be using it, use it in the daylight. Do not use it in the evening in that regard. And keep well away from it as well. We don't want those non-native EMF frequencies. Yes. So keep well away from it in that regard. But I basically got rid of my microwave, pretty much. I use a little, I don't use any plastics, any of that. So xenoestrogens, my containers are glass or ceramics, and I warm it up in those, and I just put a towel, like a paper towel, over it. So allow it to warm up. Usually if I'm basically like at work, I'll put a paper towel over something ceramic, which I'll put it in, warm it up, walk away, come back, and that's in the daytime, so I don't really have too many concerns. But at home, I never use one, and when I get in the evening, I always use my little oven, or if I'm cooking some major food for a number of days, then I'll use my big oven. So I've got a mini oven, and I've got a large oven. So yes, I do have a big roast cook as well that I have to do today after this, and cook up a big damn roast for that and a couple of other things. So I've got quite a few things to do. So I'm a few more minutes, and then I'm going to pull the plug, because now that you've reminded me, I do have to do a number of things to prepare for the next week. So I've got enough food to take with me to work, because I was a bit lazy yesterday. And the Zoom session doesn't help because, I just had time enough to make a meal. I made some lamb chops, and then after that, pretty much had the Zoom session. So I really have to basically stop early today to basically cook enough food up for the next week, which is the other thing. So, yes, too many priorities, too many things to sort out. So never stops at all in that regard. So I'm going to really quickly just go through and see whether I can see something really important into that. And mate, that would be a very, very long conversation, like glycans and stuff like that. So yes, for another day. Come this afternoon in the evening and ask me. Yes, that would be a long conversation as well. Are you going to come over and spank me? Is that it? Have you ever asked your question whether that would even be enjoyable? You should. Do I see anything that stands out? Incredibly, a great insight. Anyway, we will leave it there. And what was that about Paul Mason? Let me just, I just shot past it. What did Paul Mason mention? Possible link of gestational diabetes and autism in a post. Okay. Interesting. That doesn't surprise me. As I've said, all these sort of derangements, like Pottinger's cats, all these derangements, when you get gestational diabetes, my tongue twisting problem appears again. You really have deranged the biology of that person. And so, yes. And we know that actually gestational diabetes and also, if the mother is diabetic, the likelihood for that mother to actually have a child who's got diabetes 1 is much higher. Again, these are all the issues related to this sort of stuff. So, yeah. So it wouldn't surprise me. Obviously, doctors like Paul Mason and others, they have to be very careful. So because of the authorities could potentially, take away their license. So they have to be, put stuff out there showing the relationships, but not really push the thing, but at least get some of the messages out to people that, it's not the MMR. I mean, the Osaka research did that and showed that it wasn't the issue. It's the food supply. It's the Pottinger's cat situation. All these strange, new, rare, as they call them, I call derangements in these young children are coming from the kibble diet, from very poor lifestyle choices that people are making in terms of diet and certain other aspects, but particular diet. You can't be consuming 40 to 50% of your energy or your food intake in that regard to you, rather than using calories, which is basically, has nothing really to do with what humans use, which is energy. If you want to deal with bomb calorimeter heat, fine, but that's not what our bodies use. But when you're putting that sort of amount of crap into you and refined carbohydrates, a lot of people are, large parts of the population, it does not surprise me that the prevalence of autism, the prevalence of a lot of these conditions are rising exponentially. Helen, it's frightening. As I said, we are rerunning Pottinger's cat experiment. That's what we're doing. And we're in the 3rd generation. And that's why we're seeing these really bizarre type, especially in America, parts of Europe. In other parts of the world, we're still just entering the 2nd generation, because it's 33 years for each generation. But in the US, we are starting to enter into that third generation. It depends where you start from. Some people will disagree with me and say, no, that's not right, Harry. We didn't change our diet until the 1970s or whatever. But seed oils were introduced much earlier, so I will argue on that point. But okay, let's say it's a second generation. It's frightening if we're just at the second generation and we're seeing all these problems. So 66 years for 2 generations, 70 odd years. If you look at it that way, fair enough. Let's say, I still think we're starting to be getting to the third generation. Some people argue with me, but it is frightening what's happening out there. So, which means by the mid part of the century, we are going to be entering into very dangerous territory, when it comes to the integrity of the genetics of our species. It's not looking bloody good, and I'm really bloody worried about it. So it's frightening, and nobody's talking about it. Everybody's talking about all this other stuff, oh, did you get your antioxidants? Did you get this? Not realizing that antioxidants can be problematic. Too many antioxidants, if you train like exercise and stuff like that, and NAC can also be have antioxidant effects, can actually basically stuff your gains. There've actually been experiments showing atrophy from too many antioxidants. You don't get muscle gains. So you need that stress effect, that a reactive oxygen species to basically, it's signaling to the body to do things. We're putting things in that we shouldn't. Let's eat food, real food, which is animal foods, and do movements and moving our bodies and being in the sun. That's what we're naturally designed to do. All these other things, inputs, are just, they're not the right. And if you're going to do any biohacks, why would you do NAC? I would basically fix the mitochondria with deuterium depleted water and other protocols. Senolytics, get rid of the damn, with Pfizer, get rid of the damn, senescent cells that are secreting cytokines and damaging neighboring cells. That's the real big stuff that needs to be sorted in the body, not all this other crappy stuff that just increases the profit margins of companies. So, and it's cheap stuff that they can dish out. I mean, I used to do it as well. I mean, I only see those as interventions when people are transitioning to a carnivore diet and have got a lot of deficiencies. And even then, I try to encourage them to eat organ meats. It's the cheapest multivitamin, but then a lot of them balk at it. So what do? You have to recommend them pills because they just don't want to eat organ meats. So it's just one of those things. It's problematic to say the least. I mean, Terry Walls, doctor, MD, hit the organ meats, particular liver and all that. Yeah, pretty much she got all the nutrients back that she was missing on a kibble diet, and her body started working again. Surprise, surprise, So her MS reversed. And also because there are other factors in organ meats like phospholipids, choline, for acetylcholine, phosphatidylserine, all these other factors very important for proper brain function, and when you've depleted your body severely, your muscle meat eating is not going to make up for it. It will take a very long time. So if you want quicker bang for your bucks, you need to fix all those deficiencies very rapidly. Organ meats are the best source. So, tribal people just have small amounts, cut a bit off as a multivitamin, everyday multivitamin, but they don't need much because they've got a lot of nutrient density in their bodies. They usually give it to their children and pregnant women. But, that's the sort of tradition. Even my parents had that tradition. They used to give us organ meats, but they didn't used to consume a lot themselves. It was more prioritized for the young children and mum who was, when she was pregnant and breastfeeding. So a lot of that sort of stuff that, people did in the past. We've forgotten all that cultural knowledge. Yeah. Anyway. Oops. I think I'll go until for another 11 minutes. Yeah, but yeah, it's really that sort of stuff. Yes. Oh, yes. Definitely. We need more of that. Definitely. We actually talked a bit about that last night, about the, ways of, UVC, to basically kill off pathogens, other methods. Especially when you're upgrading the system, why not use better methods? But, so people, that's why I usually say hydrate with fat. Use some of that, there are other options in terms of water that doesn't have fluoride. Nowadays, I mean, God, fluoride, bromide, you think it. The poor, basically your poor little body is going, especially give me a break, let alone the deuterium content of tap water as well. That's the other side. Nobody talks about it either. So it's health food. I would rather hydrate with, with fat anytime in that regard. So the body does need a very tiny amount of fluoride, but not a lot. It's like it needs a lot of different trace minerals. Not an issue. It's the excessive amount that we get, especially with a culture that tells people to drink water continuously. Just upregulate your antidiuretic hormones, and you're not going to be pissing all day, and you will be basically maintaining fluids. And I can tell you, my fluids are basically, very rarely do they actually even become more yellowy. So even because I'm using some of that water, that lower deuterium water, the Enia, and I'm basically using the, for my coffees and stuff like that, I'm still getting some external fluids beyond the fluids that I would naturally get from fat to hydrate. And so, so I'll piss a bit more. And so when I actually don't have any coffee, my urine goes more yellowy, like you would get from a goat or a sheep when they piss, because they are not sitting there drinking water all day. They know they're getting hydration, low deuterium water from the leaves, from the grass, and we can get it from fat because we're hypercarnivores. So we've got different ways. So we can hydrate ourselves even if we have some through, losing. We don't need additional water, but we want the occasional coffee, so we get additional stuff, and so we dilute our urine a bit more. But when you look at every single animal, it doesn't have diluted urine. Only stupid humans do that to themselves, and then they basically flush out a lot of their electrolytes as well. Because, yes, again, stupidity. You see those tribal people that Mary Ruddock was walking around? They just showed her, you can get some water from the leaves, Mary, which is low deuterium, but they weren't drinking any. They were just walking out in an arid environment without drinking water because they were in a ketotic state. So they were hydrating with basically the fat that they were consuming and the fat that they had on their adipose tissue. Wonderful thing, the body. When you treat it right, it treats you right. But unfortunately, I mean, Laszlo Boris is the only scientist I know that basically doesn't drink water. He just uses low deuterium water that they produce, that his friend produces in the factory. He uses that to basically, well, they've become friends now. I mean, they're an acquaintance. The guy actually came to him at a conference meeting and basically told him, can you test this for me because you're a scientist? And he thought it was just nonsense. And then once he got into and looked into the research of he realized, he just missed a whole lot of things. Now they've become friends because they've known each other for a number of years now. But back then he was just some other guy that turned up and wanted him to test some stuff because he couldn't get any scientists to test it for him. The deuterium depletion, sort of whether it was successful or not. So Boris looked into it and he thought it was all a bit weird, but eventually he started seeing the light himself and became a person that promoted this sort of stuff. So yeah. Look, with some of this sort of stuff, look, fluoridation did help. Fluoridation, improved sanitation, did save a lot of lives, but it also creates a lot of other problems. It was sort of mitigated to some extent with iodinized salt to sort of mitigate some of that. And we put iodine in bread at the time in the past. Then then the industry was allowed, they changed the regulation, allowed industry to put bromide in there because it was less costly for them. It's again profit over health, and we've got the money now. I mean, we can send people to space and do all sorts of things. We've got the money to change our water supply and get rid of fluoride and actually bring in, UV C to kill off pathogens. And we could use much better methods and provide people with drinking water and water that they can shower with that isn't problematic. But unfortunately, again, profits over health, like everything in this world. It's just the way it is, unfortunately. Another source of low deuterium due to fractionation and UV effects on the ionic structures of the water molecules due to UV is rainwater. Rainwater is lower in deuterium. So if you're in a rural area and you can capture rainwater, that's really good water to use. It's to drink as drinking water. It's low deuterium water. So just letting people know who may live in rural areas in that regard. Oops. What am I going? We got 4 minutes. Can I find anything in 4 minutes? Anything that will jump out and squeeze my... Let's not go into that. TGA approved. Being studied. Very well said, Scotty. It's all experimental. Everything. Vitamin D is a perfect thing. The only reason why we need Novavax is it's traditional, and it's basically our authoritarian masters demand we have a passport. A V passport, yes, the V passport. And to have the V passport, you need to be jabbed. So basically, for us to acquire our V passport in the, our authoritarian state, and to please our authoritarian masters, we basically need to be jabbed to get the V passport. So, yes, that's the problem. Vitamin D is all we need. So if you don't need to travel, you don't need to do any of the other stuff, you don't need to worry at all. It's, but if you need to hold employment, if you need to travel and stuff like that, then yeah, Novavax is your only other option. There's a couple of others. If you checked out that recent video I made, you can look at all the different stuff. There's a lot of different traditionally made vaccines and, protein subunit ones like Novavax, which also have a very traditional approach. They don't have any replicating capabilities. So if you use that sort of stuff, you're fine. Well, it hasn't been tested for 5 to 7 years, but at least it's going to be along more traditional lines, and it's going to be less likely to have any problems. And the trial 3 that came out for Novavax showed no anaphylaxis, none of the actual issues that we've seen in all the others in their trials, and just a localized effect which all vaccines create because your immune system gets hypervigilant in that locality and races to that area of the injection site. That's all. So that's nothing new. And I don't think there's any ADE issues. Nah. And we've seen 0 in terms of concerns of those, where, you get it's called the the Trojan horse pathway. Yes, I love it. You know, being a Greek, so ironic. Yes, we should have. Yes, lovely thing. That horse did the job. Yeah. So those sort of related ADE issues are less, less of an issue. We haven't seen anything in that. That doesn't mean that there's no possibility of future variants that could happen, but unlikely at this stage from what. But at the same time, let me give you a heads up. Vitamin D. Yes, who would have thought? Vitamin D basically regulates the immune system, preventing these sort of ADE issues. So if you've got a good vitamin D status, you don't even have to worry about that either. All these problems with autoimmunity, derangements in the immune system and all that, simple thing. Just get out there and get naked like Archimedes and enjoy the sun. Anyway, I will leave you lovely people with that thought of exposing yourself. Ah, yes, that can help. Can't help with my diction. Ah, yes, I can. Come to the later one. So we're 5 hours away from the next live stream. So good to see you here as well, Neff. Yes, you got to get in early, mate. You got to get in early. It was a short in that regard. I'll tell you one thing that I do prefer. I usually prefer lake, like sort of away from the coast. There are sort of lake beds that have got these salt deposits, and there's two in Western Australia, and I get from one of them my actual salt. So, and I've actually discussed it before. There's a Deborah one. I don't get that. That comes from the other lake, but they basically sustainably done, and it's a much better. There's one other one that I do get, which is a river one, and that comes from Western Australia in the south, and that is sort of riverbeds, salt riverbeds, and because of the minerals, it's got more trace minerals, but it also has a sweetness to it. It's really soft and sweet. It literally melts in your mouth. It's really nice, actually. It can be addictive. It's probably the only salt that I actually have ever had an addiction to. So it is really nice. The flavor. Oh, I just love putting it on my steaks. So yes, it is my favorite salt. But come over and see. In 5 hours' time, I'll have it here and I'll show it to you if you appear. Anyway, thanks guys for being here. Appreciate it, and take care. I will see you in some of you lovely people in 5 hours' time. The rest of you, that's right, River Murray Salt. Thank you, Helen. That is exactly it. That is exactly it. Yes. I just want to show them the link as well so they know what it looks like. Yes. So pretty much that's it for now. And I hope I see more of you at my next Zoom session. I just have to promote it a bit better. It was a last minute thing because it wasn't going to be that this weekend, and I'm going, bugger it, why not do another one? People liked it. A lot of people turned up at the first one, about 24 people. This one we got as high as 8 people. So I was a bit disappointed that not other people turned up, but well, can't have everything in life. We'll see how the next one goes. Hopefully there's more people will turn up. More people buy webcams as well. You don't necessarily need a webcam. Let's put it that way, guys. As long as you got audio through is fine. I turn the webcams off when people come in, and if people feel comfortable and have got a webcam and feel comfortable in turning on their webcam, fine. It's not a compulsory thing. Some people may, for body issues or whatever, they may just be shy. That's fine. Just come in and just talk. You don't need to have a webcam on. It's not a sort of necessity in that regard. it's a friendly environment. We have a chat, we talk a bit of nonsense, a bit of comedy. We have a few moments, a few jokes, and we talk some serious things about a whole lot of different subject matters. So some things people will find interesting. Some people drop in for a while and drop out. Lukey came in a bit late, and then he wanted to go and do a bit of sunbaking, so he dropped out again. And then towards the end, he came back a bit after he'd done his sunbaking. So I mean, it's sort of, there's 100 spots and they haven't been filled, and people can come and go as they wish, willy-nilly. I don't have a problem. It's sort of supposed to be for you guys. That's why the whole idea is I've paid for a year sort of subscription type thing for you guys to just turn up and have some time with me, in a sense. So that's the focus, pretty much. And also with yourselves, meet other fellow carnivores that you sort of you see in the chat, sort of, where you have a bit of a chat and say hello and all that sort of stuff, but you don't get an opportunity to see them in, to converse with them. It's different when you talk to people. It's different when you're actually typing things in, so there's limitations what you can say in the chat box, and there's more things you can actually talk about. And sometimes, when you're talking to someone, you have a thought that you wouldn't have had in the chat, and by the time you have that thought, the chat's already walked past. So there are more advantages in having those sort of Zoom meetings compared to a chat sort of thing. It's a more interactive between all of us rather than just me answering questions. So I do a bit of that as well. People do ask a few things, but it's also a bit of a chat about a lot of things. So, and we're not being censored or monitored. Just the only thing I always say is just be respectful to each other. No, nastiness or anything like that. If you disagree with somebody, just put your opinions. You don't need to be nasty about it. None of us have. Everybody's really well behaved and very respectful of each other. And that's all I ask, nothing else. And I think you'll have an enjoyable get together with like-minded people on most things, not on everything. You probably don't even agree with me on many things, and that's fine. We don't have to. It's not relevant. Anyway, thanks for being here, and I better go. See yous.